What if we told you there's a study out there and it's been tracking happiness for almost a century? Not just like, moods and stuff, but like entire life. Trying to figure out what really makes for a good run at this whole being alive thing.
And we're talking about a time before things like social media, before the news cycle was going 24/7. This study gives us a glimpse into how people experience life through huge societal shifts, right? You go from World War II to like the internet age. And through it all, they're asking, what stays the same? What does it take to really live a good life?
That's what we're diving into today. The Harvard study of adult development. Get ready to rethink what you thought you knew, because what they found out might surprise you.
It definitely challenged a lot of their own assumptions along the way, that's for sure. We're going all the way back to 1937, Harvard University. Picture it, right on the brink of World War II.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1937. The world is on edge. But at Harvard, this group of researchers, they're focused on a totally different kind of future, right? They're launching a study. But not about war, not about the economy, about people.
And not just any people, right? We're talking 268 Harvard sophomores. All men, of course, it was the 30s. But still, these were the guys everyone expected to succeed. The future leaders, the privileged few, the whole deal.
And they did not mess around. We're talking in-depth interviews, family histories, medical exams, the works. They even measured let's just say they were very thorough.
It sounds wild now, but it shows you how different science was back then. They were looking for, tangible stuff, things they could measure, to try and predict who'd thrive and who wouldn't, based on all these, concrete factors.
And the guy who dreamed all this up, Dr. Arlie Bach. A doctor, but he believed that real well-being, it was about more than just, not being sick. He wanted to understand the whole man-LA person.
And that was kind of radical for the 1930s,
Yeah.
Bach was ahead of the game. He got that your mental state, your social life, all of it played a huge role in how well you were doing overall.
I mean, you'd think with all the advantages in the world, these Harvard guys, they'd have it made, right?
Yeah.
What's there to worry about? But that's where things get really interesting, because as they kept tracking these guys year after year, all those assumptions they started with about what makes a good life, they kind of started to fall apart.
Life, as they say, finds a way to throw curveballs, even if you went to Harvard. These men, they lived through wars, divorces, jobs that didn't work out, you name it. They ran the gamut of human experience.
And the researchers, they had to ask, why is it that some people, they can go through all that and come out thriving, while others, even with a head start, they crumble?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And they had some really interesting cases that highlighted this, like take case number 141, for example. This guy, on paper, had it all. Money, family connections, you name it. Top-notch education, obviously. Everyone thought he was going places.
Set for life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But he could never quite find his footing, bounced around from one thing to the next. And tragically, he actually died pretty young, feeling like a failure, if you can believe it.
Makes you think, what good is all that privilege if you can't outrun, I don't know, maybe your own demons, your own struggle?
It really makes you question the whole notion of what it means to be set, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then, on the flip side, you've got case number 158. This guy was like the definition of a solid citizen. Didn't need to be top dog, just went about his life. Steady job, good relationships.
Seemed content.
Totally. But then, get this. In his 50s, total breakdown. Never worked again, kind of became a bit of a recluse, actually. And yet, despite this huge change in his life, guess what? He consistently reported being happy.
Okay, now that's just, I don't even know. How do you explain that? If someone with a completely different path, a completely different set of experiences can find happiness, what does success even mean,
It really threw a wrench in their initial thinking. It forced them to look beyond the usual suspects. The money, the status, the achievements. They had to dig deeper into what it really felt like to be well, to be content, to be happy.
And that brings us to Dr. George Vaillant, right? This is where the study takes a turn. This psychiatrist, he dedicated his whole career to understanding these men's lives. His work is what adds this whole other dimension to the study.
Vaillant was fascinated by people's ability to bounce back, to adjust, to adapt when things got tough. He wasn't all about the cold, hard data. Don't get me wrong, he was a scientist. But he also had this deep empathy for, the messiness of being human,
He didn't just want the numbers. He was digging through Diaries, letters, these guys' interviews, trying to get at the why behind it all, the stories they told themselves about their own lives.
Exactly. And that's how he came up with his theory of adaptations, or what some people might call coping mechanisms.
Hmm.
Bailey's big argument was it's not just the stuff that happens to you, but it's how you deal with it mentally, emotionally, that really shapes your well-being.
Mm.
He said everyone develops these unconscious responses to stress, almost like a
Huh.
toolbox full of different strategies.
So it's like, imagine you've got this toolbox, right? Full of all sorts of tools. Some are going to be great for fixing stuff. Others, maybe they're a little rusty or, maybe they're downright dangerous to use. Those are the adaptations, the ways we react to stress, to life's challenges on like a mental and emotional level.
And Vaillant, there are basically two types of these adaptations. You've got your mature adaptations. Those are the ones that they help you cope in a healthy way. They build up your resilience, help you grow from the tough stuff.
So we're talking about things like, being able to laugh at yourself, helping others, taking your anxiety and channeling it into something creative, finding ways to actually use those problems to learn and grow. These are the adaptations that help us connect with the world and really thrive.
And then, on the flip side, you have what he called the immature adaptations. The ones that, sure, maybe they dull the pain for a little bit, but ultimately they hold you back.
These would be things like, what? Just being in denial about a problem, getting paranoid, blaming everyone else for what's going wrong in your life, or, turning to drugs or alcohol to numb things out.
Exactly. And those immature adaptations, they might seem like an easy way out at first, but they end up keeping you stuck. And often, they even lead to more problems down the line.
It's not about pretending like everything's always peachy, right? Life's going to throw you curveballs, no way around it. But it's how you face those challenges, how you adapt to them, that really determines your well-being.
It's like life's not a straight line, it's a winding road. And those curves, they're going to come no matter what, but it's all about how you navigate them. And what Vaillant found in the study is that even when people went through similar struggles, the ones who leaned on those mature adaptations, they tended to live more fulfilling lives. And they bounced back from setbacks way better.
It's like the example he gives of the two men. Both had incredibly rough childhoods, right? But one of them, he channeled all that pain, all that hardship into something positive, became a leader in the civil rights movement, used his struggles to fuel his purpose.
And the other, as much as it's tough to hear, he couldn't seem to find those healthier ways of coping. Ended up turning to drugs and alcohol, and sadly died young, trapped in this cycle of self-destruction.
It really makes you think about the impact that, our mindset, our coping mechanisms can have on our lives. And it's not like it erases the impact of what happened, but it's about how you move forward, right?
It's about how you choose to carry it with you. And that's something they couldn't have predicted at the start of the study. But Vaillant, he didn't just stop at those internal factors. He looked at the more traditional markers of well-being, too.
Yeah, after decades of data, he came up with 7 key factors that seemed to really make a difference when it came to aging well. And I'm not just talking about physically, but also socially and emotionally.
It's about the whole picture. And this is where it gets kind of surprising, For a study that started all the way back in the 1930s, you wouldn't necessarily expect relationships to be so high up on the list.
But there it was. Having a strong social network, especially being close with your siblings, it was a huge predictor of how well people were doing later in life. But let's break it down, those 7 factors.
All right, so number 1, we already talked about it.
Yeah.
Using those mature adaptations. Number 2, education. And not just in the did you graduate college sense, but really having a curious mind, always wanting to learn and grow.
That makes sense. Keeping your brain engaged. And then the third one, like you said, a stable marriage. That surprised them, huh?
It really goes to show you need those strong relationships in your life. And then, of course, you have the more, I guess you could call them common sense ones. Not smoking, not overdoing it with the alcohol.
The classics, taking care of your body.
Right. Maintaining a healthy weight, getting some exercise regularly. Doesn't mean you have to become a gym rat. Just, move your body a bit.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Remember how obsessed they were with cholesterol back then? Turns out your cholesterol levels when you're 50, not as big of a deal as they thought.
It really hammered home that it's not about being perfect in every single area of your health. It's about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Are you taking care of yourself generally? Are you tending to your relationships?
It's like putting all those pieces together. But then there's another twist. Remember how the whole point was to understand these guys objectively, get all the data? Turns out it wasn't that simple. Because even with all those tests, all that analysis, they realized that even the most successful guys in the study, they still had this tendency to, well, kind of distort reality a bit.
Yeah, liars of maturation, that's what they called it.
It's like as we get older, our memories, they shift a little. We
Yeah.
tend to play up the good parts, downplay the regrets. It's almost like we're rewriting our life stories in a way that makes sense for who we are now.
It's human nature to want to see yourself in a positive light.
Exactly. So you might remember yourself as being braver or more successful or, I don't know, just a better person than you maybe actually were. And the researchers, they noticed this even in the guys who seem to have it all figured out.
Especially in case number 218. Now, this guy, he was like the poster boy for the study, always scoring high on those well-being tests, successful career, loving family. On paper, he had it made.
The whole package, right. But there was a catch.
Always a catch, right?
Yep.
Even at 80 years old, he still had this lingering sense of what if? Like he wondered about this path he didn't take, a career in medicine.
Makes you wonder, even when you achieve what most people would consider success, is there always that little part of you that wonders about the road not traveled?
It's like you can't escape your own curiosity, your own self-reflection.
Mm.
Are you truly content with your choices? Or are you really good at convincing yourself that you are? Tough questions to grapple with.
Definitely gives you something to think about. And then you've got the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Case no 47. He was like the rebel of the bunch. Didn't care much for convention, marched to the beat of his own drum.
Now, this guy, he saw through what he thought was phony. Like he thought the whole idea of success, the way most people saw it, was kind of a sham.
He had his own way of finding fulfillment, even though, to be fair, he also battled alcoholism. But he really makes you realize that there's no single right way to live a good life, you know?
He really highlights the importance of figuring out what matters to you, what feels authentic to you. He really squeezed every last drop out of life, as Valiant put it.
So after decades of research, all this data, all these life stories, what's the verdict? Can you really define what a good life is, let alone tell someone how to get it?
If anything, the Harvard study taught us there's no easy answer. Human experience, it's complicated, it's messy. What they found is that a good life, it's not about checking boxes or hitting certain milestones. It's about the journey, about finding meaning in all the ups and downs.
And while their research points to things like building healthy habits, nurturing your relationships, those are all good things to keep in mind, right? But even with all that, there's no guarantee of happiness.
And maybe that's part of the beauty of it, right? The unknown.
Maybe it's about, like case no 47 said, squeezing that lemon, finding your own way to make the most of it all, whatever that looks like for you. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but it's something to keep thinking about, right? What does squeezing the lemon look like in your own life?